Greetings everyone, Ken McAlphy, the jazz vinyl lover, back to do a year-end wrap-up. I thought I'd show you some of the records I bought through the year, cool older pressings, a bunch of the reissue stuff I received, things I reviewed, and some more off-the-wall sort of stranger records that don't neatly fit into the jazz category. But just like you, I'm out there on the prowl all the time looking for records. Not as much lately because I am swimming in vinyl. I had to carve out a big space here in front of my Kuzma so I could stand here because there were records here, and it's a little bit out of control. But I thought I'd just show you some of the stuff I've picked up through the year. Maybe you get a kick out of it. I'm always on the prowl for good Brazilian records, and here in New York City we have a store called Human Head out in Bushwick, one run by the wonderful Travis. I don't know Travis's last name actually, but his wife is Brazilian, so he has hands down the best Brazilian collection in New York City, maybe on the West Coast. That's where I just picked up a couple weeks ago this Nera Leao record. I've picked up many Gal Costa records from him, Elis Regina records, Ivan Lins, and all for pretty good prices. I mean, you'll pay top dollar for the really fancy stuff, some of which I have here. But that's one, Nera Leao. I found this great Frank West album at Jazz Record Center. Fred also got in a bunch of Clef Count Basie records. This is one of them. Harry Edison on Verve, G Baby Am I Good to You. We got in a big collection of Verve, Clef, Norgran records. They're still there, some Flip Phillips records, and they're just really amazing timepieces. Timepieces of we have to keep the black musician a long ways from the white woman. What's the white woman even doing on the cover of the black musician's record? But hey, you know, it's called marketing. It's called Madison Avenue. They got to sell that stuff. Elis Regina, if you're not aware of her, is one of the greatest Brazilian singers to ever live. Her music is just joyous. And Brazilian music can be very complex. It's very joyful. It's heavily arranged. And it's extremely sophisticated. They are wonderful musicians down there. You know, at the same time that in America we had all the great stuff going on at Capitol Records on the West Coast, but at the same time in the 50s and the 60s in Brazil, they had an amazing record industry. Here's one of Elis Regina's records. Her stuff is just the best. There's another one. And I'll also show close-ups of these as we're breezing through them so you can get a better look. This is a very famous Gal Costa record, which the cover sort of speaks for itself. This is an original pressing. I think I paid $100 or $200 or some crazy price, but it's in mint shape. There's another Elis Regina record. I found this Howlin' Wolf Singing the Blues on Crown, which was a budget label, but this is actually a really great record. Another Elis Regina record. I cannot recommend her highly enough. She was so brilliant. There's another one. She died, I think, in the mid-'80s from a drug overdose, but she was brilliant. And there's another one. And from the Tropicalia collection, another Gal Costa record. All these records I got at Human Head. Human Head, NYC in Bushwick. Just, I cannot recommend that store highly enough for their jazz, for their R&B. They have a $5 jazz bin. They have a great Latin wall, I mean, like real Afro-Cuban stuff. They have a deep electronica and DJ section in the back. They have 3 turntables to check out records. Travis has a great dog. Everybody who works there is great. They have a big Discogs presence, which I've never looked at before. But Human Head, one of the greatest stores in New York City, bar none. I'm always looking out for Savoy records, and I found this. I've only seen this once, and I bought it at Stranded Records, kind of a boutique store in New York. They put everything in Mylar sleeves. Some people like these kind of Mylar jackets, but Stranded has okay prices. I paid $40 for this, which is kind of high for a Savoy. You know, Savoy, as I'm sure the Jazz Shepherd has said many times, that's a label to look out for. And I think eventually the prices for Savoy records will go up. They're all Rudy Van Gelder. They're great artists. They're sort of hard bop, so they're in that weird period a lot of people aren't crazy about. Another great Count Basie on Verve I bought at the store. Ella, another Count Basie dance session. I love these Verve records. Huge sound stage, great music, you know, really indicative of a certain period in America, post World War II, where big bands were still happening, especially Count Basie, Duke Ellington, probably many more I'm not aware of. And I'm sure the other big bands were hanging on. Tex Benke and all those guys, Glenn Miller. This is one of the first jazz records I ever heard. Donald Byrd Blackbird when I was in high school. I had a black social studies teacher, and she would play records after class, and this record just mesmerized me. It's with I think the Mazzell brothers, perhaps Harvey Mason on drums, I think, but it's just such a great funky record. And the cover says a lot on its own, as you can see in the picture I'll show you. Another Verve, another great. Sweets, Harry Edison. If you find these Verves, latch them up. They're beautiful records. They're beautifully orchestrated, beautifully performed and produced. They set a real mood. The Jazz Shepherd recently did a video on Verve versus Blue Note. Sort of, you know, when Verve was at its peak, all those guys on the label were famous. You know, everybody, Norman Granz produced Blue Note at the time, but everybody was unknown. Now the tables have flipped. Everyone knows Lee Morgan, Hank Mobley, Wayne Shorter, and most of the Verve catalog sort of goes wanting, which goes back to my thesis that Duke Ellington is kind of ignored now, which is criminal. An okay but hard to find Yusef Lateef record. I think on Savoy, it's just okay. It's not great. I was thrilled when this record came in the store. Benny Green, the trombonist, Benny blows his horn. This is just a smoking record. His records are hard to find anyway, so I was really happy to find this. This is a really weird record I found. I buy percussion records on Drew Santazzo, kind of an experimental European percussion records. I was a drummer for many years. I love percussion records. I use them when I evaluate hi-fi. Another great drummer, Andrew Cyril, signed by Andrew Cyril on the Actuel label, a label with a shady history. Apparently the owner was a real crook, but he did a bunch of really great records. Ben Webster, what more is there to say? An original Soulville pressing. Frank Stozier, great tenor player. I think he's tenor. I'm not as in love with this as some people, but I grabbed it up. It's a great lineup. On VJ, I was really excited to find this, All Night Long, which is the soundtrack to an English movie based on a Shakespearean play starring Patrick McGoohan as the drummer. And everything kind of revolves around him, but it's also Charles Mingus, Dave Brubeck, Tubby Hayes, an amazing lineup. And of course on the cover you only see the British musicians. Dave Brubeck, Tubby Hayes, Johnny Dankworth, Charles Mingus, Johnny Scott, Keith Christie. And all these great musicians play throughout the record. It's kind of a one set stage piece. I've only seen it once. It's a real blast. But you can find this movie on Netflix or on YouTube, I think, All Night Long. Not to be confused with the name of the Prestige record led by Kenny Burrell, All Night Long. This is the soundtrack, and it's a real blast. Happy to find this old Decca record, another label that is just kind of forgotten, Decca. The great Carmen McRae. Decca records have all been reissued on CD, I think, but not on vinyl. That catalog is pretty much ignored. Forgot where I found this. Frickin' cool, right? A Willie Dixon record. I was really happy to see this. Came in the store. This is the first Lee Morgan record on Savoy with Hank Mobley Quintet. I've only seen this once, and I bought it at the store, and it wasn't all that crazy, even though it is a first pressing Hank Morgan record. Lee Morgan. And then just a couple more I was happy to find in the store. Joseph Jarman, Don Moye, great art ensemble of Chicago. Right. Expatriates. I love all this stuff. Some of it's a little too strange even for me. It's weird, but when they hit their stride, it is so beautiful what they do. It's jazz, it's African, it's universal music. It's really parallel to what Alice Coltrane was doing, I think. The beginnings of spiritual jazz. And then finally I found two Cassandra Wilson records I've been looking for a long time on JMT, and they just popped up. She's, an unheralded, she is heralded, she's valued, she's celebrated, but she really is perhaps the greatest living jazz singer in my estimation. She has a total command of the repertoire, amazing voice. I've seen her live, she kind of chills a little bit, but what a great performer, what a great interpreter of the jazz canon. And then some more recent reissues and some new records. Things I reviewed on my channel, I reviewed elsewhere. Part of the Blue Note Tone Poet and 80th anniversary series, or 80th, they didn't call it anniversary, Donald Byrd, Ethiopian Nights. I hadn't really paid attention to this record, but this record is very much Donald Byrd's version of Bitches Brew, or a blaxploitation soundtrack mixed together. It's not as obscure as Bitches Brew, but it's just as churning and meaty, and the improvisations are really happening, and this is one of the best Blue Note reissues I've heard, all from last year. This really knocked me out. Donald Byrd, Ethiopian Nights. This is a new record. My friend Chris Lightcap Chris is one of the busiest upright and session players in New York City. He's played with everybody. I shot a video on him for my channel. I originally did a musician's audio files for stereo file with Chris. We're going to reshoot a video for my channel talking about his hi-fi. He's way into vintage hi-fi. He has an amazing sounding system with Fisher and KLH. I mean, really a testament to what vintage, how great it can sound. And this is his record, his latest record. He has 2 bands. This is his Super Big Mouth, his combination of 2 different bands. And Chris's music is sort of unclassifiable. To me, it's noirish, it's detective jazz, it's rock and roll to a degree, it's 50s jazz, all combined in this very unique style. And this is a great record by Chris Whitecap, and look forward to an upcoming video with Chris. Also early on last year, the beginning of last year, going on for a while, the whole scene happening in the UK with Nubya Garcia and Yusuf Kamal, a lot of it coming out of Giles Peterson's Brownswood label. And this is a sampler of all the different groups coming out of the UK, because they really have something to say that's unique, that's vital, it's invigorating, it's exciting to hear what they're doing with contemporary jazz. Some of it draws on kind of a Caribbean island flavor. I don't care as much for that. I'm more into the sort of improvisatory thing. Some of it draws on electronic and drum and bass music. But this is a great sampler. You can hear this on Bandcamp before you buy it. I love kind of old, cheesy, you know, bordering on easy listening music from the 60s, usually performed by really great musicians, studio musicians. And this is the strangest record, Avant Premier, Alain Debray and his orchestra. I mean, who is this guy? Is this Andy Kaufman and drag? This is the coolest record that skates between noir and that band Broadcast that used to be on Warp, and big band jazz and easy listening. It's just a strange record. There's a store called Deep Cuts out in Queens somewhere, and this guy has an amazing collection of records that he sells. He has 2 boxes of library records, you know, records that were cut in the UK. This is from Germany, to be used as background music for radio shows or bumper music. Isn't that gorgeous? I forgot what the label, but they put out 4 Alice Coltrane reissues. Boom, boom, boom. I want to say Superior Viaduct, but that doesn't sound right. There's one. Another member of the whole British jazz scene, Thinker Golding. There's so many things coming out of the UK, and they're so unusual. I've been buying forever these Future Sound of London comps, Future Sound of Jazz compilations. This is number 14. They used to only be on CD. This is 4 LPs, and it's primarily electronic music, but I still just dig it. It is futuristic. It always has sounded that way to me. This was another great 80th series Blue Note reissue, Alligator Boogaloo. This is just a stomping Lou Donaldson record. He made a lot of records. A lot of his early records are very bebop, Charlie Parker oriented. Then he went on later and became much more of a soul funk thing. This is right in between all that, I believe. And it's just a happening record. Rest in peace, the great Charlie Hayden. This is a killer record for evaluating your hi-fi, a beautiful recording. The always cantankerous Keith Jarrett, with the always winning Charlie Hayden, hustling. I don't know why this wasn't reissued in mono. I don't understand it. Sounds great in stereo. Would have sounded better in mono. They got the mono tapes. I don't know. Everybody's favorite, you know him, you love him, Bill Evans. I personally think the first Resonance issue was the first one. This is the latest one, live in England. As Fred Cohen said, if you want to get into collecting records now that will be worth something in the future, collect stuff like this, the Resonance, that usually come out as record store day releases. I'm not sure if they're limited or not, but another of the Alice Coltrane reissues. I love Alice Coltrane. It's just universal peace and love music. It's jazz, it's orchestral. It really is spiritual music, even though I think it's a really dumb term. Another great reissue that Warner Brothers did, the Herbie Hancock. This whole era of Herbie Hancock is great. Sextant, Crossings, M1D, those are must-have records if you're a jazz fan. All the early Hancock on Blue Note. The stuff on Warner Brothers, Blow Up, Death Wish, killer. One of the Sam reissues on the Sam label out of France. These are beautiful sounding pressings. This label, Hi-Hat, has been doing a lot of really unusual reissues, taken mostly from New York and Chicago, I guess Northeastern live performances from the 70s. This is the original Tony Williams Lifetime, well, the second one with Holdsworth. And this is like they recorded Believe It one day and the next day they did this performance, because it is freaking blazing. All the tempos are faster than on Believe It, but it's just amazing to hear Holdsworth ripping through all this stuff, and Tony as well. Sound quality's not great, but the performance is incredible. And then the original group, you know, noisy on record, noisy here, real fusion, balls to the wall, hide your wives. You know, this stuff is bloodthirsty, bloodletting music. And I love the twofers that are put out from Jazzman. These are also really worth collecting, because these are harder and harder to find. They're beautifully done. I believe this is all vocals. Oh, Blue Note Spiritual Jazz, Part 1. They did Part 1, Part 2. But jumping on the bandwagon, but they have a long history, Jazzman, of putting out great reissues, beautifully curated, exceptional liner notes, great artwork. Jazzman, worth searching out. Another of the fine exponents of jazz coming out of the UK, Ezra Collective. A lot of drum and bass stuff, just killing arrangements, forward music. This might actually be 2018, I'm not sure, Yusef Kamal. This is new on the ESP label. ESP is out there still doing stuff, the great Steve Hochi. And this unusual record, Radical Empathy Trio, features Nels Cline. Anything with Nels Cline is kind of worth buying. That guy is all over the place. And near the end of the year, this has just come out last week, the new Frank Zappa Hot Rats reissue on translucent pink vinyl, mastered from the original tapes. There is also a 6 CD box set with all these outtakes and a board game and stickers and panties and all kind of crazy stuff from the Frank Zappa estate. If you love Hot Rats, this sounds wonderful. Finally, perhaps the greatest, not a reissue, but found recording of 2019. Johnny Griffin, Eddie Lockjaw Davis. Ow, this is a gleeful party record from two of the most emotive, smoking, deep in the cut jazz musicians who have ever played the tenor. These guys are so locked together, as you can hear on so many of their records. And this was a really great discovery. Cut at a club in Seattle. The sound is excellent. And what's so amazing to me is it's not some pickup band. It's Art Taylor and Horace Parlin in the rhythm section. So this record is just popping. It is such a fun record. If there's any reissue you're going to buy from 2019, this is it. Thanks so much for watching my channel all this year. Please subscribe if you haven't already. But thanks so much for watching me this year, and I hope you have a healthy, wealthy, happy new year. Thanks a lot, everybody. Bye.